Hey, everybody, what is going on? Serial Lover Drive here, and today we're doing something a little bit different. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking conspiracy theories and playing a little bit of Apex Legends. So down below, you guys, if you're watching the video on YouTube, there's going to be some Apex Legends gameplay going on, so feel free to watch that. But otherwise, let's jump into the subject. What we're going to be talking about today is weaponized weed, weaponized marijuana. It was a topic that I heard brought up on the Alex Jones and Joe Rogan podcast. It was done just like a week ago. Now, what Alex Jones said, his sort of premise, was that marijuana is getting more and more potent because it's a government operation to stupefy the people, to hold people at bay. We'll go into this a little bit more, but I heard that. I thought, that's crazy. There's no way that's true. But it sort of caught me somewhere, right? Like somewhere in the back of my head, I'm like, is this a thing? So I Googled it because I wanted to hear what sort of crackpot theories are out there. And I was surprised. It is a thing. It's something that did happen. I don't know if it's currently going on, but let's go into the history of it first. So, weaponized weed, this was basically an idea that first came about in 1949. This is the government, the U.S. government, was looking for a way to sort of incapacitate agents in a non-lethal way. It was part of the chemical weapons program. And the specific experiments were called the Edgewood Arsenal experiments. Okay, so like this is a thing. This is documented in 1949. The government sees THC. They know what it does to people, and they think, how can we make this work in a military situation? So what they did is basically they took some of the active components in THC and they created this compound called a DMHP. So this is sort of like your more synthetic marijuana, right? Like you've got these synthetic drugs that are somehow legal. They took over and people are going nuts on them, right? DMHP is sort of the U.S. government's attempt to look into this, it sounds like. And this was 1949, so this is before there's that huge pushback against THC or anything like that. So what the government wanted to do is they wanted to create a cannabis derivative that could be used to subdue agents. They were looking for doses that would last for multiple days and would create hallucinogenic effects and sort of just stupefy people, right? Like, if you ever smoke too much weed, you sort of get couch locked. I think that's what they were going for. And it worked, right? They did testing, and for 2 to 3 days, they were able to incapacitate soldiers or people that they were testing on. Crazy to think the U.S. government used to pay you to get high, but they did. They still might, too. There's probably some research program. Anyways, so what they found is DMHP and sort of what was in it, like the chemicals it would produce, create sedation and mild hallucinogenic effects. These effects were similar, I guess, this is what's claimed, to large doses of THC. Now, I don't know about you, but if you eat THC, it's a whole different topic, but it sounds like this is sort of what happens if you smoke way too much weed. If you get into a smoke out with Snoop Dogg, this is probably the state that you're going to be in, okay? It's the same as taking DMHP, except it's probably not going to last as long. You'll get a groggy head for a day or two, but it probably won't be hallucinogenic for that long. But they managed to do that. They managed to make a drug that was super hallucinogenic for a long period of time. The only problem with this is it created an issue where you had low blood pressure effects. So if they decided to use this drug on a nursing home and everybody just went off their high blood pressure medication, things would be good, right? But if they used it on your average, standard, sort of healthy adult, maybe even a little bit healthier than me, you might get these issues with hypotension, which is low blood pressure. So what happens is when they hit these doses that are required for hallucinogenic effects, you get dizziness, fainting, and muscle weakness, which makes it hard to stand or carry anything. This is sort of what they were looking for. It also leads to low blood pressure, which is not what they're looking for, because that can create something lethal. But again, low blood pressure is a pretty good state when you compare it to the other potential, which would be a bullet. I'd rather have low blood pressure for a couple days than get shot in the head. Makes sense. Now, this program actually continued for a while. Everything I can find says the program continued into the 1970s and was eventually ended, or at least they claimed to end it, in a disarmament treaty where the U.S. committed to sort of stopping research into chemical weapons. So this was 1970. This is sort of where all the information seems to die off. But what we know about this product, let's just sum it up here. So we've got DMHP. This is a compound that creates hallucinogenic effects. It makes it hard for people to carry stuff. Presumably, they're looking at like carrying weapons. It makes it hard for people to stand, and it just sort of zombifies them. Not zombifies them, but like couch locks them, if you will, to use stoner terminology. So couch locks these people. And what happens is they just can't do anything. It just, they're for 1 or 2 days, they're incapacitated. They sort of get done with that. They wake up, they're out of it. And just like if you have a weed hangover, which is a thing if you have too many edibles, after a couple days, you feel like, hey, we're good to go, and off you go with your life. If this was used on a battlefield, that would be amazing. Or if this was used in, like, New York City, you could get probably reduce heart attacks for that whole, 48-hour period when all the bankers weren't stressed. But you guys get what I'm saying. It's an interesting product. It's an interesting concept. Now, the U.S. claimed to end testing in 1970. So here's sort of where we break from the known, the factual, and we've got to go into sort of the conspiracy theorists. So, conspiracy theory is that in the 1970s, basically, when testing was supposed to end, it didn't end. They kept going. They kept researching into this. And for the past 30 years, the government's just been working with weed, making it more and more potent and making something better and better. Now, when I was discussing DMHP, I don't know about you guys, but I was thinking edibles. So the effects that they're listing here, hallucinogenic effects, 1 to 2 days, right? Dizziness, fatigue, inability to carry stuff. That's the same sort of effects you get nowadays when you take an edible. An edible is basically a concentrated amount of THC. It is processed differently by your body. It's completely natural, unlike this compound, which was sort of synthetic. But yeah, it's not a synthetic compound, but it is a compound that causes all the effects of DMHP, and it does sort of incapacitate you. I think the U.S. government was looking to do that in the smoke form rather than the edible form, because dropping candy on your enemies isn't exactly the best way to knock them out, right? Like, they're just not going to eat it. But now the theory is that these chemicals are being released to the U.S. population to sort of stupefy people and make them go along with everything. I don't believe this. I'm gonna go into why. So, first things first. DMHP and edibles are two different genres, okay? Same with THC and DMHP. The government was working with THC, but this isn't sort of what they were looking to do with it. They decided THC wasn't a viable product. So they went another route here. And relating back to this chemical experiment, in the 1970s, I feel like the U.S. government was at peak evil as far as messing with the population, affecting them, and everything like that. And that was the same time they launched the war against drugs. So if they're going two routes, if they're trying to stupefy the population, why would they go to war on drugs? It doesn't make any sense to me. Two, weed has been naturally increasing in potency for the past, well, basically since it's been legal in California, and even since before then. It's something that every drug dealer knows. Every drug dealer wants to do that, right? They want the strongest product possible, so people come to them. Whether you think this is right or wrong, this is just the natural evolution of sort of that market. You're seeing the same thing with THC. It's the same thing that happens with alcohol sometimes, right? Now it's gotten to the point where it wasn't there, but I'm sure at one point there was a rush to make the highest potency ever clear or something like that. Nowadays, people just want a nice drink. With weed, though, there's a lot of people that they're building up these insane tolerances, and they want those effects. They want that strong sort of hit that you get from marijuana. And your first hit is not going to be like your 100th, but if the potency keeps increasing, it can be. I've done high doses of, well, what I'd consider to be high doses of edibles, and to me, they were incapacitating. To me, it was something crazy. It was something that just blew me out of the water. But to some of my friends, I've watched them eat double that and not even be affected. To me, I was couch locked. I was hungover. To them, it was nothing. And that sort of shows you that race that's going on. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think that's why marijuana potency is increasing. I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think they're trying to stupefy the population. It might be happening a little bit because of that, but I don't think it's a government plan. Additionally, many state governments have rolled out plans to actually decrease the amount of THC in marijuana. So now the question becomes, if the government's trying to decrease the amount of THC and they're trying to stupefy the population through THC, why are these two things contradict? Now you say there's multiple programs in the government and everything like that, but I just don't believe it. I just don't think the government's messing with weed to affect people. There's much better ways to do that, and it just doesn't make sense to me. It's something that is naturally occurring. It's definitely, there's a lot of truth in these theories, right? There was a program where the government was experimenting with THC, and one of those programs did look to weaponize weed in the form of DMHP. It was weaponized, it was used, it was found to be slightly effective. Again, if you're fighting off the Jamaican army, they're probably just going to get slight contact high from it, and if you're fighting, an army of, I don't know, some country where weed isn't legal and like nobody ever smokes it, if you're fighting an army for there, it's probably going to be extremely effective. But that's weaponized weed. What we're seeing today is just, capitalism. The other thing that I'd like to touch on is some people have called weaponized weed K2, and like K2 or synthetic marijuana, right? This is something that's being sent over to the U.S. by a foreign government, is the claim. It's being consumed by people, and then those people are getting hurt. They're dying. It's an interesting theory. It's an interesting conspiracy theory. And I can see where like, oh yeah, it's coming from China. We hate China. There's a trade war with China. They're sending us sort of horrible chemicals, and those are killing people. Well, here's the problem. It's not killing that many people. If this is China's attempt to poison the U.S., they could do it much better by putting like lead in baby food or something like that that's already happened and been corrected. Sending over synthetic chemicals and hoping that people take them and hoping that those people that take them are going to have bad reactions, that's horrible because A, you're probably attacking the teenage population, because let's be honest, any grown adult who's been working for a bit has the ability to get weed, probably. And if they don't have the ability, they have the ability to buy a plane ticket to a litany of states where weed is completely legal, completely just walk into a store and you buy it. So that's what they're doing. Like China or any other government's not going to be sending drugs over here trying to target teenagers. It doesn't make sense. They're going to want to target sort of high potential individuals if they're going to be taking, if they're going to be taking shots like that, trying to incapacitate a society. Who cares if you knock out, like, let's be honest here, right? If a high level politician gets dies, right? He gets assassinated through chemicals or whatever means, that's going to have a huge effect on the government. Whereas if you do that to some teenager who wants to smoke some weed, it doesn't really do anything. It's just an evil act. And I don't believe that there's any government out there that's doing evil just to do evil. They've always got some motive. I just don't see the motive behind that. So that's sort of my wrap up of this, okay? So let's just dive into it real quick. And thanks for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Weaponized weed, definitely a thing. It was a thing in 1949, and theoretically that was ended in 1970. Whether it was ended or not, we don't know, because the U.S. government can't discuss any chemical research programs that they've got, because that would be against all sorts of international treaties. You sort of are going to be left to decide whether they decided to keep going down that route or not. But I can guarantee you in Iraq, you are not getting opposing soldiers high, right? Like, that just wasn't a thing. 2, weed is definitely getting stronger, but I do not believe it's because it's being weaponized. I believe that's just sort of capitalism at work. And 3, there are synthetic drugs being sent over to replicate the effects of weed. Those are definitely affecting people. It's definitely hurting people. It's killing people, actually. Don't do them. It really is a bad thing, but they're not... It's not a conspiracy. It's some people over in a foreign country, usually it's China, let's be honest, in a foreign country trying to make some money, and people are getting harmed in the process. And part of the reason those drugs are being sent over is because they're legal. A lot of these things are easy to sell. You can sell them at a gas station or wherever, whereas marijuana, you can't do that. that's a whole nother topic, and that's going to be where we sort of wrap this up. So, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this is literally the first time I've done anything like this, so please let me know. If you guys like it, we're going to make it a weekly thing. Maybe I'm going to make it into a podcast. We'll just see how it goes. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and until next time, peace.